Jeremy Akers is a regenerative wizard empowering curiosity, care, and courage by using liberating structures for organizational game design. He's also the Chief Vibe Officer at Regens Unite. Key takeaways from this podcast include how liberating structures enable asynchronous participation and the propagation of information across networks, how liberating structures can extend beyond communication to include architecture and other psychotechnologies. The principles of liberating structures emphasize empowerment, inclusivity, and trust building. How liberating structures can be integrated into Web3 technologies and the design process, and how designing with intention and empowerment can lead to regenerative outcomes. This is Christian, and you've found True North, a podcast that's equal parts sense-making, soul-searching, and storytelling. If you resonate with this project, please subscribe on your platform of choice, leave us 5 stars, and share it with a friend. It's the best zero-cost way to allocate your support, and it helps us bring high-value guests on the show. Plus, each new sub plants 1,000 trees in the blighted forest of my heart. You can help regenerate the desolate wasteland that is my audience by planting your thumb on that subscribe button. Check out truenorthproject.com for all the links. Much love. Enjoy this conversation with Jeremy Akers.
The hour is late and the stakes are high, my friends.
Yeah, kind of obstacle is the way vibes, right? Like kind of forces action when there's consequence and there's stuff on the line. So since we're going to be, more direct, and maybe we can elaborate later on with future conversations, but let's just dive right in. So what is the Regenaissance or regenerative movement? What do you mean by regenerative?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Regenaissance is the proper term. Like, at least that's the vibe as far as I'm concerned. It has a lot of the elements that I think we are aspiring to in terms of vision of the future, right? This moment of significance from a historical perspective. If we were right, and we were able to do all of the things that were necessary to make the turn, right, to do whatever this fundamental transformation of human culture is, and keep in line with planetary boundaries and not leave anybody in the fucking donut at the same time. If we were able to do that, this would be the most consequential time in human history. And so let's just say that we do, and totally step into that. There's the obvious regeneration, right? The returning the earth back into the Garden of Eden, stepping into indigenous cultures, vibe for thousands of years as humans, as stewards of nature, and doing everything that we can to not only live in line with that, but also to enable it, right? To enable the natural power of ecosystems to heal themselves, to step into what can we do actually, not just, plant trees, not just be stupid about it and, do whatever, throw them out of helicopters, but no, let's just be embedded in place and remember what it's like to be home, and to say, no, this little chunk of this planet, this is where I live, and everything and everyone that I share that place with, that's my fam, and I'm there for it. I'm gonna pay attention, and I'm gonna do what I can to connect all of those things that are already there. So there's that, planetary scale regeneration. Let's fucking grow. Then there's obviously the social aspect, right? Human culture, in order to do that, we're talking about capital V, full caps value change, right? And I don't mean like value, like, oh, what is the value of X? I mean, like, what are the values that we aspire to? And what are the things that we go, yes, that's the thing that we want to put on the pedestal and we want to like rise up to, and that we go, that shit right there, that shit is cool, right? Fuck your Lambo, like, this motherfucker right here just like um, stewarded these these hectares right here and is generating food, um, you know and biodiversity and habitat for friends, fams, and creatures in the environ. Is harvesting water, that is growing trees, that is planting rain, that like so that vibe. In order to do that, like, everything that we think is like aspirational and is goes for cool, and the way that we want to spend our time, like, if that becomes the vibe, like, this whole idea of like go to school and get a job is totally irrelevant. Like, it's just like not even wrong direction, totally wrong direction, but not even wrong direction, just like, what the fuck are you doing with your time?
Antithetical. And
Yeah, I mean, but not only antithetical. It's just like a boneheaded move. Like, antithetical, yes, but like, like, not even. So what is the nuance? Like, antithetical, yes, for sure, but like antithetical in a way that is like when your fucking uncle.
degenerative.
Well, yeah, yes, but when your like uncle catches you out of your household, right, out of your neighborhood, around town, hanging out with the wrong crowd and doing something fucking stupid that that he knows your mama did not fucking raise you to do, like, and just like grabs you by the fucking scruff of your neck and just like flicks your fucking forehead, like, what the fuck are you doing, right? Not, so not just antithetical, but just like caught out of the vibe, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's
So
like
that
we need the elder wisdom. We need the wake up call. We need the flip to the forehead, being like, "Hey, what the fuck are we doing?" Like, we have the
yeah,
most precious jewel that we know of in the universe. I mean, for humans, for our species, and for all the species here, it's the jam. It's the only shit that matters.
only
And
party in town.
yeah, we're shitting the bed. We're shitting down both legs.
Yeah, totally.
So
So
I just want to frame it real quick up a little bit, because we jump straight into Regenaissance, but this kind of is based on the foundation, or it's framed within the context of something like the poly crisis or the meta crisis or
the
the
everything
narrative.
crisis.
Yeah, the everything crisis, the idea that we are sort of we're hitting planetary boundaries and exhausting natural capacities of the earth. And we have this sort of cascading downward spiral happening into what you might say degeneration instead of regeneration. And we're actually creating a race to the bottom dynamic and a tragedy of the commons and arms races that are
I'm
existential and
so
all those
bored
types of
already, Christian. I'm sorry. I love you. I know that like the setting context is important for other people, but it's fucking
things.
boring. Like, we're already there. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, everybody's living in the midst of it. And
Yeah.
the vibe is just so fucking off. Like,
Okay.
I can't like spend another moment like looking at the problem space. Like, I feel the problem space every fucking day. I'm 40 hours a week in problem space trying to
Right.
raise humans in a way that nothing in the problem space is encouraging me to do. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, fuck it. Yes, totally. Everything was going to hell in a handbasket. And so how do we like, in the context of these are the incentives, and this is
Yep.
what the momentum
Yeah.
is sort of like trying to perpetuate, late stage fucking capitalism. How do we, in the context of this thing, still wants to grind our bones into bread, into its meal? And how do we then like find the bandwidth to get our needs met? How do we get our needs met so that we can have the bandwidth to show up in a different way.
Yeah.
Whew.
Yeah. Like, not just, so this is an interesting thing about the idea of regeneration too, is it's not just, you know, showing up to be sustainable in my mind. It's actually bringing something else, like something additive beyond that. In other words, we went down this sort of path, right, of separation or whatever you want to call it, and the problem space that you referred to is sort of the byproduct of that path that we've gone down, and we're kind of in this consciousness of, Forrest Landry would say, mastery of causation, of causal process. We've got capacity to shoot shit into space, and we're building AI and all this other stuff. And so to bring all of that we've sort of accumulated from this journey into the fucking underworld, right? To bring that back and into wholeness and into, you know, coming back into coherence with the resonance of Earth, and coming back into that indigenous wisdom, and remembering, like Carl Sagan said, we're on a fucking pale blue dot in the middle of infinity together. So bringing that all into bringing those two polarities together and reconciling them, to me, is kind of what the Regenaissance is. It's not like a uh, what's the way to say this? It's not a call to a primitive time, like let's go back being hunters and gatherers, because that's just nonsense. Like, we got 8 billion humans, and so it's bringing the sort of gifts, you might say, of our technology and of our evolution down that path, to then come back to being the not just the stewards of the planet, but and the gardeners, but the artists and the inventors and the scientists and the fucking, all of the shit that the creative, the endless creative capital that humanity has now, right? Like, it's bringing those fucking, attorneys and tech bros who are capable as fuck in some sense, and bringing them into the game, into the infinite game. Does that any of that land with you?
I don't know, right? I'm not sure. Like, we have, so there's a particular point in departure. Where is it? So all of the things that we can do, all of the things that we have built, these castles of abstraction in the sky that are so far removed from like base reality. So for sure, we have like, let's use legal as a particular example. Like, we've got people that are like geniuses in this way that we have of constructing rules and like playing a very particular game that are brilliant virtuosos at it, and like, if they have to feed themselves, are are as worthless as infants, right? So this we have so much specialization that I'm not sure that is, like, let's not talk about sustainable. So where's the departure? Like, industrialized civilization is not for this world. Like, 6 continent supply chains, dinosaur juice coming out of the ground and showering us with infinite amounts of energy. Like, I mean, sure, moonshots, techno utopia, we get lucky, fusion finally comes online, you know, more solar energy than you can possibly imagine. I'm still super skeptical that like the planet can bear us having access to that much energy. Like, can you imagine it? If there was an infinite amount of energy, how quickly we could like accelerate the degeneration of the biosphere. I'm consumerism as a way of being. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So I don't think that I think I maybe I get what you're talking about in terms of like not a primitivization, but a
Well, can
simplification in vibe, hands down.
Yeah, 100%. I think we were talking before we went live about how simple designs are typically better and how you get too complicated and the design actually starts to get shitty. But so what I'm pointing to is not to say that, you know, some techno-utopian rapture ideology that we're gonna invent our way out of this mess by just putting more gas, you know, like our foot more on the gas, and we'll push through. Um, I think that without the, you know, wisdom of gods, you can't steward the power of gods, right? So more endless energy is existential if you don't have the wisdom to steward it, right? Like you know, and we're already in this really dicey predicament with our capacity with atomic energy, right, and nuclear weapons and things. So I'm not. I mean, AI is the next
Word.
version of that. So it's you know, jury's out to see if we even make it through the fucking filter, right? Like we're already in the zone of like dicing
I mean,
the filter dicing us up.
no, we're gonna make it. Like I'm very confident because I mean, if we think about like the what the actual solution space is, it's all extraordinarily accessible, right? Like landscape scale water harvesting and sequestering of carbon through growing biomass and just keeping it in the goddamn ground. The solution space is super simple. Like I know
Mm-hmm.
that people get terrified when you think about geoengineering, but like geoengineering from the space of like we're going to grow plants and then we're going to go syntropic agroforestry style, like we're going to cut down the tree and we're going to put it into the ground that it just grew out of, and new trees are going to grow on top of it. Like that is not very complicated. It's
No,
simple
it's
enough to
not.
do it if we had the incentive structures to get there. So I'm
Yeah.
actually quite optimistic. The problem though is between our ears.
Mm-hmm.
Like coming back to this idea of culture, like in order to do those things, like we're going to actually have to look at each other and go, that is the thing that's worth doing. Like
Yes.
that's what I want my, you know, that becomes the new version of becoming an NBA superstar and buying mama a house. Actually is like, no, I'm gonna plant a food forest and I'm gonna build a structure out of the materials that are readily available in this place, and that's going to cost more energy, physical, biological, sweat equity than it would if I used the the industrialized version of those products. But that's a cultural change. It's not so much about like, you know, the solutions are definitely there. I don't think a lot of people know about them right now. Like, and I think we have an association with them that like, oh, like living like regenerative construction. Let's just like this little tiny piece of it, like building a structure with locally available materials that are readily available and don't require massive energy inputs to secure.
Yeah.
Like our thought of that is like some form of fucking hut, and like that triggers a judgment that feels primitive. But I mean, I'm with Vandana Shiva on this one. Like, bring peasantry back again, baby. Like, I think that the simplicity of these lifestyles has great attraction for us that are just like running so fucking hard in the
Yeah.
context of capitalism.
Well, it's hilarious too, because look at how much money is being spent on fucking biohacking, which is essentially just like getting us back to the peasant life. You know, like I'm wearing some blue blockers right now because of this fucking blue light coming at me from this screen, right? Like if I was in a peasant, you know, air quotes, peasant lifestyle,
Yeah.
I would actually just be like have a great circadian cycle and like waking up with the sun and sleeping with the sun and being
No.
in nature, etc. Now, I'm not saying like I should be malnourished and eating some sort of shitty grain diet that I'm forced to like work on the land by some feudalist lord or something. But still, I get the point, right?
This is the association, right? This is the
Yeah, yeah,
association. When you say peasant, like you just think like the image that comes into my mind is like that fucking fucking that scene from Monty Python and the Holy Grail when they're just down in the filth and there's like, what are you doing? Like, we're collecting filth. It's what we do. It's like, we're the peasants,
I think though the key,
anarcho-syndicalist capitalism or whatever.
yeah, the key point though is that rather than shooting for billionaire status and I need to scale and maximize and leverage everything and be this like crazy, this weird anomaly of a person that has this insane access to resource and wealth and stuff. Instead, this simplistic lifestyle of, knowing your humans, trusting them deeply, being around the fire together, getting the sunrise and the sunset, getting in the local bodies of water, connecting with the flora and fauna of your bioregion, like all that shit it seems so alien to us because we're stuck in these fucking boxes inside of a box culture and a structure. And the architecture
and who's the
itself,
aliens in that context? Who's the aliens in that context?
Yeah, it's a good point.
we're estranged from nature.
We are so estranged that we're pathologically shitting the bed and fucking our own planet. It's insane. So and without making this a riff back into the problem space, let's talk about that shift into culture. So I think of the Regenaissance as a cultural wave, as a wave of transformational culture, and we talked about this a bit in Colombia where we met at a regenerative finance summit.
Shout out to Joe.
Yeah, Joe Brewer, and
keep your head up with all the drama, man.
Yeah, Bari Chara, doing the good old Lord's work. And so the vibe there that we had talked about, part of that conversation was regenerating humans has to be part of regenerating the landscape and regenerating the earth, right? Like, who's going to do that work?
Same thing.
Yeah, same thing. That we're intrinsically one with the earth, and we're expressions of it, we're fruits of it. We came out of it, and so if what I was talking about earlier about this the lawyers and the tech bros being part of the Regenaissance, I mean, like, how do you regenerate human consciousness in order to redirect that capital, so to speak, that human creativity, that economic energy, and all of the things that come along with a tech bro and a lawyer and whatever else, and put that back into sequestering value into a localized initiative, like you're saying.
Word. I think I dig where you were going. Thank you for coming back on that. Yeah. So a little teeny tiny bit of context. So I fuck around with this project that we lovingly call Regens Unite. That is with an exclamation point and yes, a raised fist. And in that context, we're just trying to bring people together to vibe the vibe and like imagine into what that culture sort of feels and looks like. So in that context, in that space, like the things that we've been talking about, it has to do with the regeneration of self, like community, culture, and the biosphere. Like all of these things are like one and the same as far as I can tell. So it's not an issue of first regenerate self, then regenerate like culture, then regenerate biospheres. Like, no, these are all like your regeneration of self will be seen by your ability to regenerate culture and biosphere, and your investment in regenerating culture and biosphere will accelerate and influence your ability to regenerate relationship with self. Right? The vibe is go spend some fucking time in nature and take care of a thing and take care of a place and like experience how much that makes you feel like a better human being. Not from the like, oh, I'm such a great human being, I took care of this place. Look, allow me to look down my fucking nose at all these degens out there, which I'm sure we should be so lucky that could be the vibe, right?
But it's like you shouldn't be having to like fucking post a selfie about it in order to get the credits,
Right. Well, maybe you will, in some of these refi, fucking protocol proof of work and, impact validation thing, but it won't be like a social theater of check me out, bro. It will be much more like, hey, I just want to check in and log my work so that we can just be objective about I'm putting in the grind, right?
Yeah.
You know, I think the future of whatever work looks much more like a social network than it does look like working for an organization or a company. Probably some form of, God willing, decentralized protocol, and where we do stuff like that, where that is the mechanism, not just for social validation, but the social proof of impact,
Yeah.
right? Hey, you know, this is me. This was the place I tended. You know, just checking in so that anybody else who's in the space can either pick up the baton and do the next thing, or that can come, you know, drift. Whoever's drifting through can just also document and go, yeah, that was a thing that happened. No bullshit, no funny business. You know, let's just keep going.
If you
So,
if you look at the history of work all the way back, that's what it was. You know, a Dunbar level society, a hunter gatherer society. It was a decentralized protocol of everyone knows everyone, and there's reputational value, and it's hard to fuck everyone else over and be a fraud when everybody's talking about you behind your back and can just confront you about shit, you know, because we know who you are.
right, yeah.
So you're basically saying like,
No
how do
credit
we?
scores needed when everybody
Right.
in the hood knows your name. Right?
Right. So what is the modern the 2024 whatever modern age version of the localized society, the Dunbar? Well, it's see because it's transcending the Dunbar level now, but we have to figure out how to create those incentives that we were able to do. You know, in other words, we were able to sort of defend against defection and prevent, you know, incentivize people to not defect because it was actually disadvantageous to defect against your tribe. So
Hmm.
we got to figure out how to make that, you know, the vibe, and like you're saying, shift the incentives for sure. So I'm hearing you on that, and I think that the way forward is some sort of synthesis between what already worked, right, and the wisdom that's ancient, with sort of modern uh, know-how and technology, and you know, our modern, you know, frame has to be part of it, because I think you can't stop the in its tracks the momentum of, you know, life is emerging, and there's this sort of thing that rubs me the wrong way sometimes that I hear with, you know, hippies or regen folks or just anyone who's an environmentalist, and that is that humans are some sort of stain on the earth, and that we're
Hmm.
somehow we're not nature, like we're separate from it. And it's like, I get the distinction if you're trying to, you know, talk about a human system versus a natural system, and, you know, it can be semantically useful, but at the same time, there is no true distinction. Like, we are a natural system, and, you know, Las Vegas, where I'm at, which, you know, is the, like you said, it's the only place that's less sustainable than Vegas would be like a colony on Mars. And so that's where I'm at. And still, when I see Vegas in the plane, I'm like, oh fuck, man, this is a strange thing nature's doing, but it's doing it, you know. And we are
Hmm.
the doers. We're the worker bees of fucking nature emerging, and life is evolving. So how do we use that creative eros, that life force energy, that evolution is driving us, and direct it into this sustainable, regenerative, protopian future that's actually better for everyone. It's better for the individual. It's not, you know, like the billionaire isn't better off in a world where the air is polluted, the ocean's full of plastic and not fish, and he's lonely and fucking despairing and nihilistic and thinks this is a simulation. You know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
that's kind of the bummer, is like even the winners of our current game are in fact losing.
Hmm. Word. Well, so what are patterns that I think might have possibility of success?
Yeah, and this could be a good time to riff into liberating structures if you want.
Yeah, yeah. So, mm, so smallness, right? Smallness is a real enabler. Um, when I think about, there's a couple of different ways to go at this. just the whole question of scale, right? So we're talking about is big capital C culture change, and it's very easy to get sucked into like the Silicon Valley type thinking of like we have to create a new culture and that culture has to scale, right? Is a is I think and in I think that follows the pattern that is a downward spiral, and I don't care for it. I actually want to think much smaller about my interventions. I want to think much smaller about my associations and organizations, and much slower about my about the actions I undertake, because I have legitimate uncertainty about what the second order consequences of those things will be. Because it's easier to get started at those scales, right? I can start to do something that gives me an actual genuine feedback loop where I get to see the results of my inputs, and it's way fucking easier to come to agreement about what we could do, what we should do, what we will do, and how we will go about doing it if I'm in a crew of 5 people than if I'm in a group of 15, if I'm in a group of 50. Like, if I'm at the scale of 150 already, that's like really fucking hard. And, then you want to talk about planetary coordination. Get the fuck out of here. Like, let's get tight with getting shit done at a scale of like me and my 4 homies. Like, can we get something accomplished there? And then let's find a crew that vibes, that we might be able to coordinate our actions to getting something bigger than either of our sets could get accomplished together, and like grow that way. This is why, shout out to fucking Rich and, the Micro Solidarity Gang and the extended and Spiral Europe universe. um, I think they're thinking about crewing, and as it scales into larger coordination structures, is spot on. Like, show me that you can make shit happen with a small crew, and then keep going. You will find a very natural point of of scaling when your crew has to coordinate with another crew, and just like you will find out that you've got new problems when you try to make that jump in scale. And so, can you get nice at that and then loop in a couple more crews, and guess what, brand new problems come out that and then just sort of keep going much more organically. I feel like that's very accessible to everyone. Like, right now, you can start doing that. Doesn't take really a shit ton of resources
Or an
to get
audience,
started there.
or yeah.
Exactly. Like, otherwise we're in this waiting pattern of like waiting for somebody else to like there's no savior. Like, I'm sorry, but there's no regen Jesus that's going to come and unite us all under a banner of fucking of kumbaya. It's going to be absolutely everybody lifting together, and like for sure we will find somebody who, when we are ready to do that work, when we're already doing that work, someone will for sure emerge who is playing the drum that synchronizes our fucking feet. Like, absolutely. Like, that is again super primitive technology, extraordinarily effective, right? We want to coordinate action. Like, think of it like a dance. Totally works. And so, through that metaphor, I think we've got ourselves a chance. So, smallness. So, you mentioned liberating structures. It is a pattern language for communication. Pattern. Let me try and say this in a way that doesn't suck. Sorry, that's only going to be accessible for nerds. So, kind of pitch mode. So, most conversations that that people have take the form of one-to-many communication. Like, if you think about maybe not at a barbecue. At a barbecue, what do you see? You see lots of small groups of people, like having a chat, like groups of 2, groups of 3, groups of 4. But even then, groups of 2, groups of 4, like split into 2 groups of 2, right? And everybody's talking to everybody else. But when we think about like explicit coordination, we get pulled into these Stone Age structures that follow this one to many pattern, right? It's the presentation, it's the priest on the pulpit, and everybody shuts the fuck up and listens, right? It is the status update where we go around the circle and everybody takes a turn being on the pulpit and everybody else shuts up and listens, and we bore each other with irrelevant shit. It is the managed discussion where somebody who has the most authority like fires question to everybody who has less authority, and you should probably tell that person who asked the question the shit they want to hear, otherwise you get thrown out of the window. Or we do the brainstorm thing, like where we all fucking throw spaghetti at the wall and then we argue what's funny and what's not funny, what's sticky and what's not sticky. Or we do the WWF style freestyle, free for all, where we just get in a big group and we have an unstructured group discussion, and the loudest person takes up the most space, and quieter voices, if they're really lucky, can bend the ear of someone who has influence at a later date. Like these are the like 5 Stone Age communication technologies that like the patterns of conversation that we just fall into, like because they're super easy, they're default. So if we think about the way that centralizes communication and really slows down the the throughput or the actual exchange of information, energy, vibes, whatever, right? The way that those patterns of one to many are really slow. If you're in a room with 50 people, one person talks and everybody listens, no matter how brilliant the moderation is there, it's just really slow. Like you got a bunch of brains waiting to participate actively that are just receiving and probably coming up with some fire fucking insights that just can't get a word in edgewise. So if we can decentralize that conversation, if we can split up into smaller subgroups and have lots of conversations at once, we can increase the throughput or the actual exchange of ideas, information, insight, energy, vibes, call them whatever you want. We can just get a lot more fucking thinking and communication done.
Yeah, the image coming up for me is a cortex, like a brain that's got all of these webs of interconnected neural pathways and synapses between different neurons. So if each person is a neuron or a node in our society, in our culture, in our species kind of ecosystem, planetary species at this point, how can we create as many of those synapses between us as possible? And that gives rise to, because there's more surface area, there's a greater perimeter that can actually where more exploration can happen, where more curiosity is unfolding, where more creativity is emerging. Like all of that can then create some sort of bottom up magic where something different will emerge that did not have a chance at coming through from the one to many that you were talking about. Does that track?
For sure, for sure. Yeah, that's totally the vibe. Like we're processing lots of information in parallel rather than in series, right? So, hyper threading your conversation, your communication, so that everybody can get a word in edgewise, and we can figure out where um, we can be very inefficient with conversation, actually, with communication. If you think about one to many communication, we have to be very efficient, like in order to make that work, because like the opportunity cost of giving passing the microphone to the person who's going to waste everybody's time is really high. But when everybody's communicating with everyone else, it doesn't matter. Like we can be super redundant in our communication, and that actually acts as signal that says, oh, many different groups are having the same talking about having the same conversation. That's validated, and you're also at the same time creating space for the minority report, the hot take that nobody else is thinking, from the crazy guy or the person just looking at the problem from a different direction, that understood the question differently, but is coming in with a from way left field with some information that nobody else is considering. You're also creating space for that to actually have an opportunity to take root and get integrated into the distributed cognition. So
Yeah, I
by,
love that term.
by
Distributed
yeah,
cognition is beautiful.
yeah, it's the, and I think it's the most technically accurate as well, right? So decentralizing the conversation, we give a lot of opportunity. It also feels great, of course. It also creates a lot of surface area for safety and security, because quieter voices can feel confident to have a communication in a one-on-one, whereas even in a group of three, it's all already, some people already step back and just let other people do all the talking. And great things happen, like especially if I get to have the opportunity to have a conversation with somebody who's generally really quiet, but of course has unique insight. Like, they're going to say something that I'm going to go, ooh, that's fucking interesting, and the next thing you know, I'm going to be standing on top of a goddamn table going, hey, everybody, check this shit out. This nerd over here is talking about some interesting shit, right? I'm going to upregulate that signal so fucking fast, and so that just gets to happen. So liberating structures have the tendency of doing this thing where they include and unleash everyone, so that we can get lots of information process going. They also have an additional characteristic, that is they use a form of narrative-based inquiry quite often. So two things are significant. Narrative, get people to tell stories about the past in order to reveal patterns that we might want to consider for the here and now. And the inquiry, right? Guide a discussion by offering questions and getting people to consider those questions, to ask more questions, and to answer them. So by offering, pretty tried and true questions around purpose, around paradox, around, problem spaces, to create hypotheticals, to think about things that you're not normally allowed to. There's a lot of ways that liberating structures ask interesting questions to these small groups of people, that help guide the discussion in coherent ways to find both problem solutions, whatever you're up against, right? If we think about, you mentioned surface area, I'd like to think about the topology of communication as like water flowing over that network, over the landscape of this topography that we are together. And so, as the sort of attention flows across that landscape, it gets to move around obstacles and over them, and just, sort of through the the permeable membranes of the topology. So the inquiry, the questions, can guide that flow in good directions. And then the sort of last category or bucket or interesting things that liberating structures offer us are around artifacts in a couple different directions. So both artifacts from like frameworks for thinking, right? Framework for thinking is kind of like, here's a lens and look through it, and try and see what you notice by making this particular pattern salient. Like, so it's not a liberating structure, but there's a similar one. The Cynefin sense making framework is one of those, right? It's a whole frame that has a lot of different moving parts that just helps you orient yourself, and you can help figure out what the hell is going on. So by offering those shared frames of reference, we can get a whole bunch of people to sort of think in a similar way, around around different stuff and the same stuff, right? So it just means that like we have a higher probability of a coherent conversation when we're all sort of using the same metaphor. So there's a bunch of different frames for thinking that I think about as artifacts and the way that those help us cohere. And we can both use those artifacts, like put on those frames for thinking, but we can also encode information in those artifacts in such a way that helps enable asynchronous communication, right? If we're really familiar with what's a specific example, the eco cycle sucks because it's hard. These are kind of hard to explain without the visuals because I'm talking about an artifact. But eco cycle planning, what's another one? If you've ever done open space technology, that uses
Mm-hmm.
this artifact of a glorified Excel spreadsheet, you know a bunch of columns and a bunch of rows to look at times and spaces, and put subject matter in them so that we can organize time attention in a big group of people, in a sort of decentralized way. um,
Yes. So basically, across space and time, you're opening up a portal that allows. It's allowing for the inputs to come in, and there's a structure and a framework there that kind of clarifies the signal that's coming in across, uh, asynchronously, more or less. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, it just helps again, like, so the real point here is coherence, right?
Hmm.
So it helps communication to cohere in a very simple way by saying, hey, at this time, at this place, this is the topic that is going to sort of be on the table. If that's a topic of interest to you, show up there. And by the way, there's a whole bunch of other things in different places happening at that time. So choose your own adventure. Use follow the offer that makes the most sense to you as an individual. And so that's pardon me, that artifact of the marketplace itself, that
Mm.
sheet that has the
Yeah.
times and the places, enables attention to cohere very easily. Like, it doesn't
I
take anything but some fucking markers and a goddamn flip over or some paper and some tape, and bam, what's going on where and when. And
yeah.
you can, and like a group of 200 people can easily go, okay, this is where I want to spend my time, and vibe the vibe. So
So
that's one of these artifacts. There's obviously a bunch of others, like your classic shit, 2x2 matrix, right? Comes up over and over and over again. It's just a really simple way of like, okay, what do we make our matrix out of?
yeah,
So we call those critical
balancing polarities,
uncertainties.
like
Yeah,
management of polarities and whatnot in the matrix is a popular use of it.
for sure. So there's other artifacts like purpose to practice. For any initiative, what's the purpose? What are the principles that you need to follow to accomplish that purpose? Who are the participants that need to participate, in order to follow those principles and accomplish that purpose? What are the structures that they need in order to be successful? And what are the practices that they're actually going to do in order to coordinate their time, attention, and energy and get shit done?
Yeah.
And the eco cycle. There's a whole bunch of fucking artifacts that you can both use and create. And like the creation part is the most interesting, right? By sort of dumping the information, the content of your conversations into these frames of thinking, like, we can just like make it real easy. Like, once you sort of get the hang of like, this is the way we encode information about this type of shit, like, I can like leaf through these things like a flipboard, right? And go, oh, okay, that one, that one, that one, that one, and they just become like really easy to sort of read in a visually simple way. So
Beautiful.
yeah, those are the three elements: like how to
Okay.
arrange interaction, how to guide the conversation, and how to encode information and use artifacts.
So let me speak it back to you in my words and see how much of that I got. So liberating structures could kind of be thought of in three components or three elements. One would be the element of creating more throughput or surface area, decentralizing from the one to many to the many to many, right? And kind of it's more of an open source vibe. It's like we're trying to source the signal of a collective or of the totality of the members in the jam and the network and the group and the society versus just having one person have the mic all the time. And the you called it an archaic or a old like a fucking Stone Age structure, right? Of like the hierarchy of just one person on top. So there's that component of throughput and surface area. There's the kind of forum dynamic. I use the word forum because when you were speaking about the narrative inquiry, it brought up a kind of a picture of Socrates and the forum and dialogos and this idea of using inquiry and story and narrative to bring to source more wisdom and to go deeper and to inspire curiosity, right? And so a kind of a space, and I'm using the term loosely because it's not a physical space, but like a social space for that kind of inquiry to emerge and to occur. And then there's the third component, which is the artifacts or like the architecture of the space, like the framing of it, right? So the structures that you physically, you build, quote unquote, to frame the conversation, to set people up for success, to kind of point people in a certain direction, to create guardrails or however you want to say it, to bring the kind of signal out that you're looking for. And that could be asynchronous, because of the power of some of those artifacts. And obviously with technology, you can do this in a super open kind of collaborative asynchronous way, even digitally. So does that all kind of track? Did I miss anything important?
Yeah. I think the you pointed at something that maybe I didn't mention as well, which is the asynchronous participation. So that the ability to export the thinking that we did right here and
Mm-hmm.
right now
Mm-hmm.
into a digestible, like compressed, like to compress that information in such a way that it's able to propagate across the network, that people can not only interpret our addition to the conversation, but they can also add new information
Right.
into those frames.
So
And
this podcast would be an example of part of that, to the degree that people can source some sort of signal from what we're talking about. The part that's kind of missing is how do they add their signal to it, right?
mhm.
And that would be a good thing for me to wonder into as to how this platform could maybe emerge into something more like a liberating structure that is sourcing more signal than just the one to one here. But I still find value in the one to one. Like I think that it
Mhm.
allows for a type of depth. The surface area, the expansion of the surface area and the perimeter with more people and in the right structures is very powerful. But I still think that to also be able to kind of single out people or small groups and go deep is also very very powerful as well. And um, yeah, so we're coming up close to the hour, so I want to ask you a question real quick, which is, how do you feel about the idea of liberating structures? Because for me, this meme transcends communication technologies and just the frame of how do we, you know, use our language and mouth sounds to communicate in between humans, and what kind of other tools and structures are we using to source signal from people. I also think that liberating structures can be architecture, they can be psychotechnologies, they can be rabbit holes that you find and you come across. You know what I mean? Like someone's
Mhm.
YouTube channel can in fact be a liberating structure if it in fact liberates people to expand their consciousness, to think beyond what they were currently, the box that they were currently in before. So, what do you think about liberating structures and that term being used beyond the frame that you're traditionally using it, or in this kind of communications frame?
I mean, I think there's a bunch of principles behind these things that I think are certainly not limited to their application. Um, like it, so liberating structures in particular are 33 distinct patterns for communication, instructions on how to have different types of conversation. They follow the principles generally of including and unleashing everyone, practicing deep respect for people and local solutions, building trust as you go, learning by failing forward, practicing self discovery within a group, amplifying freedom and responsibility, emphasizing possibilities, believing before you see, inviting creative destruction to enable innovation, engaging in seriously playful curiosity, and never starting without a clear purpose. So, yes, insofar as that there are artifacts out there, there are ways of communicating and coordinating action that lean into those principles. Yes, you're going to find yourself with a liberating structure. Then that can be not just these analog communication technologies, but those can be digital forms of like software. I think in what I've seen, um, like I think Web3 is a particularly interesting space to think through these principles into um, into how to enact them or embody them with code. So far, the only thing that I've seen in particular that really pings these types of patterns for me has been coordinate. I think coordinate is quite an obvious liberating structure, because it has this way of like, especially including and unleashing everyone, especially practicing these deep respect for people, local solutions. It does all of the things, right? It it doesn't offer you an answer to the question of like, how do we reward people? It offers you a way to have the conversation and continue and to ask the question well, as it were.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, there's all types of good stuff that very well with liberating structures. What's interesting to note is that these particular patterns of communication play well with a lot of other communication frameworks and patterns themselves. So the liberating structures can be very easily integrated into other things. Um, oh, I'm running out of gas. Um, and I will say that they have this tendency of bootstrapping a particular mindset, worldview, or orientation, a way of being and looking at the world, that is most that I would call, but not just regenerative. I would call it ecological by nature. Like they bootstrap a type of ecological thinking. The reason I fuck with them so hard is because they're a great way to side load, a very complexity centered ecological way of thinking without talking about that shit. But by using the patterns that are natural, like an understanding of those processes and patterns sort of it arises.
Mm. Beautiful. Yeah, I keep thanks for listing out those sort of values or pillars behind the liberating structures framework, because those are great. I'm going to meditate on those a bit more, because I'm aligned with everything. I really particularly love creative destruction and like group discovery, serious playful curiosity. All that stuff's awesome. Um, I'm thinking a lot about architecture as a regenerative, like liberating structure. And if we look
Mm.
at a large part of why our society is so fucked, it's because of how our architecture is framing consciousness, right? Like architecture is kind of like, in a way, like Vervaeke uses this frame of your worldview being frames or lenses that you actually look through at the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
So your worldview is framing how you see the world, and it's possible to take your lenses off, your worldview off, and actually see it versus see through it. And I think architecture, like physical built spaces, frame the way we see the world and how our consciousness emerges and forms over time, and we sort of get, kind of domesticated, if you will,
Mm.
into seeing the world a certain way because of the actual built spaces in which we live and our environment, right? So, like if you grow up in Las Vegas, you're going to have a particular bend of consciousness, versus, with like blue light every night and fucking the strip and all that shit, right? Versus,
Hmm.
growing up in Ecuador in a rainforest. They're going to be very different consciousnesses based on just the framing of the built environment. So,
Hmm.
what do you think about this idea of, because this has kind of been alive for me lately, in the last couple of years, is creating architecture that's regenerative and that's a liberating structure in the sense that it increases the sovereignty and creativity of the individual, balances that with the coherence of the community and the collective. So it's sort of playing with this polarity of individual and collective, and trying to strike a
Hmm.
balance there. So not culty cult in the direction of tribe, and not total self-maximizing, lonely, whatever nihilism on the other side of the individual spectrum. And then you're also, orienting people towards wellness, or you might even say eudaimonia, like thriving, flourishing. So bringing the,
Hmm.
the human battery online, getting the physical systems
Mm.
oriented properly with wellness technologies, using art and other inspirational, creative artifacts in order to inspire consciousness expansion, and using psychotechnologies and different things like that. Like, using the actual liberating structures you're pointing to within the architecture inside the forum or whatever social space
Hmm.
you create for that. So I think of like this new sort of wave of culture, including like, what does the architecture of this wave look like, is what I'm trying to say.
Mm.
And I think of like, the church used to be the thing that bound us all together. You look at the middle of town in the center square in the highest building, and it's the steeple of the
Mm.
church. There's our timer. It's the steeple of the church, which is like, hey, this thing is why we're on this together, right? And I think our society now, I mean, what's the equivalent of that now? Like money? We have basically fuck all for like the thing that really binds us together. And so something like, what is the future protopian architecture of the thing that creates meaning 3.0, as Jamie Will would say, and like actually binds us together while upregulating the individual instead of,
Mm.
extracting value from them, and, creating that in a sort of, is as decentralized and egalitarian, and as infinite game like as possible.
Yeah. So there's a beautiful, well spoken, great question. Mm, there's so the first thing that pings for me is, so what we're talking about is design, right? What we're talking about is both in the conversation space, like a conversation can be designed, a building can be designed, and the crucial difference between a good design and a bad design, um, is most importantly intention, right? Are we designing on purpose, or are we just designing, on autopilot, based on the the incentives du jour, right?
Mm.
So, like, for sure, we can wish that we were in a different incentive landscape, and that would be awesome. I look forward to that day. But even right now, in this current incentive landscape, we can intend to use different patterns of design, and so that is possible and accessible to us right now. And like I said, the intention is, to me, the killer app there. Like, so when we just start like doing things on purpose,
Mm.
then those can, like as you sort of allude to, they can they can they vibe, right? They can work together and support one another. Like there's a constructive resonance that happens. That yes, when I use the liberating structures, I'll be a very specific example. If I were to use, if and as I do use liberating structures and like shitty corporate offices with big fucking meeting tables that take up shit tons of space, and actually get in between people, like communicating and talking and vibing with one another, or I use the liberating structures in a space, that is not a fucking glass tower office building, but a space that is, connected to nature, that has plenty of fresh air and bright and light, and has like just chairs with no intermediate, stand or sit and be with each other, right? Like that intention of how the space is designed supports the communication. Liberating structures has a bunch of design elements. How the space is organized and the materials that you need to use to do that are one of the design elements there. So hands down, for sure, that vibes 1,000%. There was something else. I forgot what it was,
Well, well, yeah, you
but
said build with
intention is the
intention or
thing.
design with intention. And to
Mm-hmm.
me, the question is like, what is the true north of this design? What is the North Star of this building or this, company or this, my life, anything. Like you can design your life, be the architect of,
Yep.
your life. So I think of true north as a cool meme to sort of center my awareness on, what's the fucking point, make it meaningful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, give yourself some directionality, right? I think, like, again, intention, right? Here we are again. So design and ah, so coming back to like design as a thing, as a science, as a field of study, as a way of interfacing with the world. Science is fundamentally about patterns, right? It's about like, hey, these are good ways that get you these type of outcomes, and familiarizing yourself with a bunch of patterns is a great move to like increase your option space. It was empowerment. So
Yeah.
if you want, like, for me, when I look at the principles around liberating structures, they're they're fundamental to empowering people, right? So in terms of reversing the pattern of extraction, like, to me, that's the polar opposite. So how do, rather than extracting value from our interaction, how do I empower you? How do I actually invest some energy into accelerating your, maybe accelerating is not the right word, but I mean, invest my
Catalyzing, maybe.
energy into nurturing your latent capabilities, right? How do I be generous with my connections so that I can help open up new opportunities for you,
Yeah.
right? How do I empower the good vibes that, for me, are particularly grounded in curiosity, in care, and in your ability to be courageous,
Mm,
and take bold risks that seem to be supported by some serendipity in your environment, right? So that idea of intention and designing for empowerment, I think, can get us a very, very long way, with that is able to bootstrap itself. This is, I think, another like really deep thing. Like, there's a lot of scarcity trap dynamics sort of at play in the world, like right now, but just in general, like the things that we can look at and go, oh, like, if we're gonna do this regenaissance thing, this thing needs $1 trillion, like 40 fucking years ago. So there's obviously a lot of scarcity dynamics at play when it comes to this stuff. But if we can design with the intent to empower, we can bootstrap a lot of good things with what is already in the kitchen, right? We can cook up some stone fucking soup with what we just got laying around if we can just, intend empowerment left, right, and center. We can make something out of what we got and turn that into something that is just delicious.
Fucking beautifully said, man. I love it. And yeah, that's infinite game vibes written all over it. Empower people just for the sake of it. No return on investment required, or necessary. So I think that's the beautiful thing about that too. And that's kind of the vibe of regeneration to me is it comes back. It always comes back. In fact, if you're better off, I'm better off. If you're worse off, I'm worse off, right? And if there's fucking trash out there, it's bummer for me, right? So like
Mm-hmm.
there's definitely a reason to do the thing just because it feels good. I mean, you don't have to do it for some future, ROI or some other incentive. So
Well, this is
what
interdependence, right?
Mhm.
Your outcomes are not significantly or in any meaningful way different than my outcomes,
Yeah,
right? So,
I've got a
the outcomes of the 5 people I spend the most time with are like totally my outcomes. That's what my life is going to look like. So,
yeah.
if I can improve theirs, then my that rising tide will lift my boat like just by osmosis.
Absolutely. I'm looking at a print of Alex Gray's painting Interbeing, and that kind of sums it up perfectly. It's like we're all really just one anyways. So uh well
Mm-hmm.
man, this has been a fucking treat. You are a wizard, and you help people in implementing these structures, and you do a lot of, design work yourself and training in this space. Where would you like to point people if there's any aspiring regens who are curious about what you're up to?
Um, it's funny. So the thing that's I think most like nowish, um, is the Refi DAO actually. Um, so Refi DAO is going to be doing a cohort of local node organizers. So people that are organizing basically meetup groups and trying to like kickstart solidarity networks and play around with this regenerative finance technology and all over the planet really. So if you're interested in that mimetic space around regeneration and building community and are curious about how especially you know facilitation, the intention of empowerment, can be a superpower to help these spaces and help people cohere, especially. Then check out Refi DAO and their beta group of the local node or the local node cohort thing. I think there's going to be a gathering this next week. And wise crowds, we do cohort based groups of learning journeys around liberating structures. So there's always a group to drop into and get your reps in practice. And if you want to be like super intentional about that, there's all types of stuff. And also feel free, like come with questions. I do this Wise Crowds design call every Monday at 4 p.m. Central European time, where I'm at here in Amsterdam. And you can find us at enter.vibecafe.xyz, 4 o'clock Mondays. And we are just doing peer to peer consultation. And so you can come with any, situation, question, challenge, especially where you're communicating with other people. And I am always there to talk about how you can apply liberating structures to those sticky widgets. And whoever else is there will bring whatever toolkit and skill that they have to bear on the challenges of whoever shows up. So you can show up to both offer consultation and contribute into that solidarity network and support one another, or you can show up with a question, a situation and a challenge, and come get some help. or show up as with a curious mind and a learner's beginner's mind, and listen as we connect challenge to potential solutions, and learn some shit, and maybe give some of that stuff that you're hearing a try if it vibes with situations you've got.
Beautiful. Yeah, I've been on a couple of those. They're excellent. So thanks for providing the holding the field for that. It's really rad what you're doing. And any last words before we wrap?
I mean, fucking Regens Unite. This is the vibe.
Fuck yeah, dude.